talk tonight if we need. Don't everybody panic. I don't have an agenda, but I've pretty much talked my agenda out, except for one real important issue. And that is, Jerry's got some good ideas to put $8 million back in the local economy. But what good is that $8 million going to do if they devalue our currency to the point where it goes into hyperinflation? Now, we've got a legislator here that was on the platform committee of the Republican Party, and she's done a lot. Aubyn, I'd like you to come up here and talk about how the Republican Party has officially adopted a plank supporting gold and silver as opposed to fiat money. And tell us that story of how that got there.
Don't want to put you on the spot.
It's an important issue that we all need to pay attention to.
Well, Paul is the authority on the monetary system. I am not. However, I do believe that gold and silver are the major background for our currency. And of course, a lot of us know that our Congress years ago gave away its authority to manage the currency in our nation, and they gave it to an independent banking organization, and that's where our problems started, and they've continued ever since. Another thing that happened in 1972 was when the UN gave some very hardcore environmental organizations a seat at the table and recognized them, and that has also become part of the equation now, and we see where they shut down practically every segment of our economy in one way or another. What happened at the Republican State Convention was some Ron Paul delegates, and they happened to find themselves on the National Affairs Committee. So we made some changes, and I think when the Trial Lawyers Association sees some of those changes, they're going to be very, very upset. One thing I would like to talk about was Ginny's question on the wilderness and the Galton. I came from a meeting this morning, and there was some Montanans for multiple use people there, and some others interested in forming a coordination status to enable us to better deal with federal agencies. It's rather interesting, but the Forest Service right now are carrying on negotiations with selected people to help them determine how they want to manage our North End. And we, for years, have considered that our playground. We've lived there, we've recreated, we've worked there, my husband's logged there. It's been part of our customs and our culture to utilize our resources. And our economic dependence depends upon the utilization of our resources. That's why it's so important to elect people like Jerry, who understand how things come together. He's worn out leather gloves. He knows what it is to go out and make a living the hard way in our county. And there are other people who want to put their hands out and receive a government grant. And this is what we're experiencing right now. I would just like to mention that the Forest Service invited people last weekend to have a camping trip up in, I suppose it was at Big Terrio, I don't know for sure. My assignment right now is to find out who authorized that meeting, who did the inviting, and who were invited. We're hearing that it was a Kootenai Stakeholders Organization, and that can't be true because all of the people who were stakeholders were not invited. So there are things going on right underneath our noses. And I really commend you, Paul, for this town hall type meeting so people can get together and share issues. We need to share with each other, because as long as it can be swept under the rug, it's a non-happening. It's really important. I don't have any technical ability to do this kind of stuff, you know.
That's what I'm here
I have
for.
trouble with my cell phone even. But anyone who can document any of these happenings, they should do that. Even if you just write it in a little notebook, you know, I saw this when. So I really think this is a wonderful idea, and I hope that it keeps on. Other organizations start and people are interested for a while and then they back off. So, you know, we can't do it all at once, but we have to keep at it because we're all in it together and we're all going to live with the consequences of actions or inactions.
Thanks, Aubyn. Let's upgrade the name of this outfit. Instead of Eureka Town Watch, let's try it Lincoln County Watch. What do you think?
Yes.
Lincoln County Watch. Okay.
Yeah.
Aubyn mentioned about the money system and precious metal. I'm not the expert, but I know a guy that is, and that's Ron Paul. And I've learned a lot from Congressman Ron Paul over the last 20 years. He's a student of the Austrian School of Economics, free enterprise, free markets, no interference by government. And let me give you a little bit of history. This country was perfectly solvent. 1913, a bunch of banksters got on a train owned by J.P. Morgan, and they went to a little place called Jekyll Island up in Alabama. And they drew up the framework for a quasi-private corporation to take over the money system in the United States, and that organization became known as the Federal Reserve. It's not federal and it has no reserves. But they effectively conned the United States Congress. Actually, it only took 3 people. 10 minutes before midnight, December 23rd, 1913, 3 members of the Senate on the floor voted against each other on the Federal Reserve Act, and the President of the Senate broke the tie. And that's how we got, essentially one man gave us the Federal Reserve System. Now, let's go into a little bit of the law about that. The U.S. Congress, or the U.S. Constitution commands that, and we wrote that document, we the people, for the government to follow, commands the U.S. Congress to, quote, coin money and regulate the value thereof, unquote. The 10th Amendment for the Constitution says that no power, let's see, how does it go now? All powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. And what that means is that if it's not written in the Constitution specifically authorizing the U.S. to do it, they don't have the right. So now my challenge to you is to show me in the constitutional document where the Constitution authorizes the United States Congress to delegate their power to coin money and regulate the value thereof. It doesn't. So, the Federal Reserve Act is unconstitutional, but all the judges are bought and paid for it. So nobody's ever brought it to a constitutional challenge, right? So we have a bunch of private banksters running our economy, deciding whether to inflate the money, how much of the money to print, who gets the first use of the money, and so on. Now I use that term money very loosely in that context, because it's not money. Those are credit notes. Now remember that up until the middle 60s, our paper money said silver certificate payable to the bearer on demand. In 1971, Richard Nixon, Tricky Dick, convinced the whole world to accept Federal Reserve notes as real money. He conned the whole world and took us off the gold standard. Now let me show you what that does. 1971 to 1980,